The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky terrain, casting long shadows across the mesquite and palo verde trees that dotted the landscape. Aiyana moved silently through the brush, his moccasined feet finding purchase on stones worn smooth by countless seasons. At 29, he was one of the most skilled hunters in his Apache band, his lean frame moving with the fluid grace of a predator. The scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a reminder of a cavalry skirmish 3 winters past, caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the cottonwood leaves. The sound of running water grew stronger as he approached Willow Creek, the natural boundary that separated Apache territory from the white settlements. His throat was parched from tracking deer since dawn, and the creek offered the purest water for miles. As he crouched to part the tall grass along the bank, expecting to find the usual solitude of the borderland, his dark eyes widened at an unexpected sight. A woman knelt by the water's edge, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders as she worked a bar of lye soap against a cotton dress. The fabric of her own dress, a deep blue calico, clung to her curves where creek water had splashed, outlining her slender waist and the gentle swell of her hips. She was young, perhaps 30, with olive skin that spoke of Spanish heritage rather than the pale complexion of most Anglo settlers. Elena Martinez paused in her washing, sensing eyes upon her. She had chosen this remote bend in the creek specifically to avoid the gossips of Cedar Ridge, the settlement 3 miles east where she had lived as a widow for the past year. The other women whispered about her, how she kept to herself, how she refused the marriage proposals of the local ranchers, how she seemed content in her solitude. What they didn't understand was that solitude was her shield against a world that had already taken too much from her. She turned slowly, her heart hammering as she spotted the Apache warrior crouched in the brush not 20 yards away. His copper skin gleamed with perspiration, his black hair held back by a red bandana, and his chest was bare save for a leather vest adorned with turquoise beads. A hunting knife hung at his side, but his hands rested calmly on his knees, not reaching for weapons, not preparing to strike. For a moment that stretched like eternity, they simply stared at each other across the cultural chasm that separated their worlds. Elena had heard the stories, raids, kidnappings, scalping, but this man's eyes held no malice, only a quiet intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. I didn't know anyone else came here," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the babbling creek. Aiyana understood English well enough, having learned it during his youth when he'd been forced to attend the government school for 2 brutal years. He rose slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "This water belongs to no man," he replied, his accent thick but his words clear. "Apache drink here for many generations." Elena's grip tightened on the wet dress in her hands. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee back to town, to safety. But something in his calm demeanor kept her rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of constantly living in fear, or perhaps it was the loneliness that had settled into her bones like winter cold. "I'm sorry," she said, beginning to gather her washing. "I'll leave." "No need," Aiyana said, stepping closer to the water's edge. "Creek is wide enough for 2. He knelt upstream from her, cupping the cool water in his hands and drinking deeply. Elena watched, fascinated despite her fear, as droplets ran down his chin and onto his chest. There was something almost ceremonial in the way he drank, with a reverence she had never seen white men show for nature. "So you live in the settlement?" he asked without looking at her. "Yes, Cedar Ridge." She hesitated, then added, "I'm Elena." He turned his head, studying her with those penetrating dark eyes. "Aiyana," he said simply. "That's a beautiful name. It means eternal blossom in my tongue." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My mother hoped I would bring beauty to a harsh world." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was something intimate about this exchange, sharing names and meanings beside the flowing water. Do you come here often?" "When the hunting is good in this direction." He gestured toward the hills behind him. "And you?" "When I need to escape the town. The people there." She trailed off, unsure why she was confiding in this stranger, this enemy according to everything she'd been taught. "They judge you," Aiyana said with understanding that surprised her. "How did you know?" "Your eyes. They carry the weight of others' words." Elena stared at him in amazement. In one sentence, this Apache warrior had seen what the people she lived among had failed to understand in a year of living beside her. "My husband died last spring," she found herself saying. "Fever took him. The men in town think I should remarry quickly, for protection, for propriety. They don't understand that I need time to..." She paused, realizing how much she was revealing. To heal, Aiyana finished gently. Yes. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and copper. Elena realized she had been at the creek far longer than intended, but for the first time in months, she felt truly at peace. I should go, she said reluctantly, wringing out the dress she had been washing. They'll wonder where I am. Aiyana nodded, but made no move to leave. Will you come again? The question hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Elena knew the danger, not just from him, but from her own people if they discovered such meetings. I don't know, she whispered. I will be here tomorrow at sunset, he said quietly. If you come, we talk more. If you don't, he shrugged. The creek will remember this day. Elena gathered her washing and stood, her wet dress heavy in her arms. As she turned to leave, she looked back one more time. Aiyana remained kneeling by the water, but his eyes followed her until she disappeared into the tall grass. The walk back to Cedar Ridge felt different somehow, as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Elena's mind raced with questions and possibilities she had never dared consider. By the time the settlement's wooden buildings came into view, she had almost convinced herself the encounter had been a dream. Almost. The following evening, Elena stood at her kitchen window watching the sun sink toward the horizon, like a golden coin dropped into distant mountains. Her small adobe house sat on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge, isolated enough that her comings and goings often went unnoticed, a blessing she had never appreciated until now. She had spent the entire day replaying every moment of her encounter with Aiyana, analyzing each word, each glance. Common sense told her to stay away from the creek, to forget the Apache warrior with his understanding eyes and gentle voice. But loneliness was a powerful adversary, and for the first time in months, someone had truly seen her. "Elena, you decent," came a gruff voice from her front porch, followed by heavy knocking. She smoothed her hair and opened the door to find Marshal Tom Bradley, a weathered man in his 50s with steel-gray whiskers and suspicious eyes. Behind him stood Robert Henley, one of the town's more prosperous ranchers, a widower himself who had been increasingly persistent in his attentions since her husband's death. "Marshal Bradley, Mr. Henley," she nodded politely. "What brings you by?" "Mind if we come in?" Bradley asked, though he was already stepping across her threshold. "Got some concerns to discuss." Elena's stomach tightened, but she gestured them toward her small sitting area. "Would you like coffee?" "This ain't a social call," Bradley said, settling his bulk into her best chair. "Had reports of Apache sign near Willow Creek yesterday. You been washing there lately?" Heat flooded Elena's face, but she kept her voice steady. "I wash where the water's clean, Marshal. Same as always." "That creek's dangerous territory," Henley interjected, his pale blue eyes studying her intently. "A woman alone out there. It ain't safe, Elena. Especially a woman as—" He paused, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "As desirable as yourself. I can take care of myself, Mr. Henley." "Can you?" Bradley leaned forward. "Apache been more active lately. Cattle missing from the Johnson spread. Tracks spotted near the old mining road. Could be they're scouting for raids, looking for easy targets." Elena thought of Aiyana's calm demeanor, his respectful distance, the way he had drunk from the creek with such reverence. It seemed impossible that he could be connected to cattle theft or violence. "I appreciate your concern," she said carefully, "but I've never had trouble at the creek." "Yet," Bradley said grimly. "Thing is, Elena, a woman in your position, well, you're vulnerable. These savages, they got particular appetites for white women. Stories I could tell you." He shook his head darkly. "Which is why," Henley said smoothly, "you need protection. A husband who can provide for you, keep you safe." He reached across and covered her hand with his own, soft, pale, and damp with perspiration. "I've been patient, Elena, respectful of your mourning period, but it's been over a year now." Elena pulled her hand away. "I'm not ready for remarriage, Mr. Henley." "Ready or not, it's what's best," Bradley said. "Robert here's got the biggest spread in the county, plenty of hands to protect what's his. You marry him, you'll never have to worry about Apache or anything else." "I don't love him," Elena said quietly. Both men exchanged glances. "Love's a luxury, darling," Bradley said with a harsh laugh. "Survival's a necessity. You got no family, no male kin to look after you. What happens when the Apache decide they want more than just cattle?" Elena stood abruptly. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern, but I've managed quite well on my own. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have evening chores to attend to." Henley rose slowly, his face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, Elena. This country's getting more dangerous every day. A woman needs a man's protection. And I need time to think, she replied firmly, moving toward the door. After they left, Elena sank into her chair, her hands shaking. She could feel the walls of her small world closing in, the expectations and demands of a society that saw her only as a commodity to be claimed and protected. The irony wasn't lost on her. They spoke of Apache as dangerous savages, yet she had felt safer in those few minutes beside the creek than she did in her own home with these civilized men. As twilight deepened, she made her decision. The walk to Willow Creek seemed longer this time, each step weighted with the knowledge that she was crossing more than just physical boundaries. The cottonwoods rustled in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to its mate, a wild, lonely sound that echoed her own heart. She reached the bend in the creek just as the last light was fading from the sky. For a moment she thought she was alone, and disappointment crashed over her like a wave. Then she saw him, sitting quietly on a flat boulder upstream, as if he had been waiting for hours. "You came," Aiyana said softly, rising as she approached. "I wasn't sure I would," Elena admitted, settling onto the grass beside the water. "My own people, they warned me away from here today. Because of me? Because of your people. They think all Apache are raiders and killers." Aiyana was quiet for a long moment, watching the water flow past. "Some are," he said finally, "just as some white men are murderers and thieves, but they judge all Apache by the actions of a few, while judging whites by their best intentions." Elena considered this. "You speak English very well. Government school when I was 12 tried to make me forget Apache ways, beat my language from my tongue." His jaw tightened. "They cut my hair, put me in white man's clothes, told me my mother was a heathen. 2 years I spent in that place before I escaped back to my people. That must have been terrible. It taught me that white men fear what they don't understand and destroy what they fear." He looked at her directly. "But you're here. Why?" Elena struggled to find words for the complex tangle of emotions that had driven her to return. "In town, they see me as a problem to be solved. A widow who needs a husband, a woman who needs protection. They don't see me, just what they think I should be." "And I see you," Aiyana said simply. "Yes." The admission felt dangerous and liberating at the same time. "You see me." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. A great horned owl called from somewhere across the creek, and Aiyana smiled. "My grandmother would say the owl brings messages from the spirit world," he said. "Perhaps it approves of this meeting. What would your people think if they knew you were here with me?" His expression sobered. "They would not understand. Many have lost family to soldier attacks, to settler violence. To them, all whites are enemies. And yet you're here too." "Yes," he said, his voice barely audible over the water. "I am here too." Elena felt something shift between them, an invisible thread connecting two people who should have been enemies. The danger of it thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. "Will you tell me about your world?" she asked. "The real one, not the stories they tell in town." Aiyana's face lit up with the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "If you tell me about yours." "The real one." And so they talked as the night deepened around them, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their losses. Elena learned that Aiyana had been married once, to a woman who died in childbirth along with their son. She told him about her husband Miguel, a gentle man who had died too young, leaving her adrift in a world that had no place for independent women. When the moon reached its zenith, they both knew it was time to part. "Tomorrow?" Aiyana asked as they stood. "Tomorrow," Elena whispered, already knowing that each meeting would make it harder to walk away. As she made her way back to Cedar Ridge, Elena realized she was no longer just seeking escape from her loneliness. She was walking toward something far more dangerous and far more precious than she had ever dared to hope for. For 2 weeks, Elena and Aiyana met at the creek as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Each evening brought deeper conversations, stolen glances that lingered longer than they should, and a growing awareness that what had begun as curiosity was blooming into something far more dangerous. On this particular evening, storm clouds gathered in the distance, and the air crackled with electricity. Elena arrived at their meeting place to find Aiyana waiting with a bundle of soft deer hide in his hands. "Rain comes soon," he said, glancing at the darkening sky. "I brought shelter." He had constructed a lean-to against a large boulder, using branches and the hide to create a cozy refuge. As the first fat raindrops began to fall, They ducked inside, suddenly closer than they had ever been. The scent of leather and sage that clung to Aiyana's skin made Elena's pulse quicken. "You planned this," she accused gently, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. "Apache know how to read the sky," he replied, but his smile suggested he had indeed hoped for this intimacy. Thunder rolled across the landscape, and rain began to fall in earnest, drumming against the hide roof of their makeshift shelter. Elena drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders, and without asking, Aiyana moved closer, offering his warmth. "Tell me about your wife," Elena said softly, surprising herself with the question. She had been wondering about the woman who had claimed his heart, and jealousy was an emotion she hadn't expected to feel. Aiyana was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with old grief. "Her name was Itzel, rainbow in our language. She laughed like running water and had hands that could gentle the wildest horse." He stared at the rain beyond their shelter. "We were young, perhaps too young. When she died—" He paused, struggling with the words. "Part of me died with her." Elena reached out instinctively, covering his hand with hers. "I understand. When Miguel passed, I felt like I was drowning in silence. Everything we had planned, everything we dreamed, gone. You loved him very much." "I did. He was kind, gentle. He treated me like I was precious." She smiled sadly. "But I was very young when we married, barely 17. Sometimes I wonder who I might have become if I had more time to discover myself." "And now you know?" Elena looked at him. This man who saw strength where others saw vulnerability, independence where others saw defiance. "I'm beginning to." Lightning illuminated the sky, and in that brief, brilliant moment, their eyes met with an intensity that made Elena's breath catch. Aiyana reached up slowly, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Elena," he whispered, her name like a prayer on his lips. "We shouldn't," she breathed, even as she leaned into his touch. "No," he agreed, but neither of them moved away. The space between them seemed to shrink until Elena could feel the warmth of his breath against her cheek. Her heart hammered against her ribs as he cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the high curve of her cheekbones. "If we do this," he said quietly, "there is no going back. Your people, my people, they will never forgive such a betrayal." "I know," Elena whispered, her resolve wavering like the flame of a candle in the wind. The sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Elena jerked back as the thunder of hoofbeats grew louder, accompanied by men's voices calling over the rain. "Elena! Elena Martinez, where are you, woman?" It was Marshal Bradley's voice, along with others she recognized from town. Panic flooded through her as she realized they must have seen her leave, followed her trail to the creek. "They're looking for me," she gasped, scrambling toward the opening of their shelter. Aiyana caught her arm, his eyes sharp with concern. "How many?" "I don't know. 3? Maybe 4? She looked at him with fear and desperation. "If they find you here—" "They will hang me," he finished calmly. "Go to them. Tell them you sought shelter from the rain. What about you? I know ways through the brush they cannot follow." He pressed something into her hand, a small piece of turquoise carved into the shape of a flower. "So you remember this is real." Elena stared at the beautiful stone, warm from his touch. "Aiyana, Elena!" The voices were closer now, just around the bend in the creek. "Go," he urged, and she could see him already preparing to melt back into the wilderness that had shaped him. Elena stumbled out into the rain, her hair and dress quickly soaked through. She had barely made it 20 yards from their shelter when Marshal Bradley appeared on horseback, flanked by Robert Henley and 2 other men from town. "There you are," Bradley called, riding closer. "What in Sam Hill are you doing out here in this weather?" "I was caught in the rain," she called back, trying to keep her voice steady. "I found shelter under those rocks." Henley dismounted and strode toward her, his face dark with suspicion and something else, possessiveness that made her skin crawl. "You could have been killed out here. Lightning, flash floods, not to mention hostile Indians." "I'm perfectly fine," Elena insisted, wrapping her arms around herself. "No, you're not," Bradley said grimly, scanning the area with experienced eyes. "Found Apache sign not 50 yards from here. Fresh tracks, horse droppings still warm. Could be a whole war party in these rocks." Elena's blood turned to ice. If they searched more thoroughly, they might find Aiyana's hiding place. "Please," she said, moving toward her horse, which one of the men had brought. "I just want to go home." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Henley said, helping her mount despite her reluctance to accept his touch. "And then we're going to have a serious conversation about your safety." As they rode back toward Cedar Ridge, Elena clutched the small turquoise flower hidden in her palm. Behind them, lightning continued to split the sky, and she wondered if Aiyana was watching from somewhere in the darkness, as alone as she felt, despite being surrounded by the men who claimed to protect her. The ride back to town was a blur of rain and worry. By the time they reached her small adobe house, Elena was shivering from more than just the cold. The men insisted on searching her home before leaving, and Henley lingered after the others had gone. "This has to stop, Elena," he said, his voice low and threatening. "These midnight wanderings, this stubborn independence, it's going to get you killed. That's my choice to make." "No," he said, stepping closer until she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "It's not. A woman needs guidance, protection. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." Elena backed toward her door, fear creeping up her spine. "Mr. Henley, I think you should leave. I think you should start taking me seriously." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist tightly. "I'm offering you everything: security, respectability, a place in this community. All I ask in return is that you stop this foolishness and accept your place as my wife." "Let go of me," Elena said firmly, though her heart was racing. For a moment his grip tightened, and she saw something dangerous flash in his pale eyes. Then he released her, stepping back with visible effort. "Think about it, Elena. Think hard, because your other options are running out." After he left, Elena sank into her chair, the turquoise flower still clutched in her fist. The walls of her small world were closing in, but now she had something worth fighting for, someone who saw her not as a possession to be claimed, but as a woman worthy of love and respect. The storm raged outside, but inside her heart, a different kind of tempest was brewing. 3 days passed before Elena could safely return to the creek. The townspeople watched her with increased suspicion, and twice she had spotted men following her at a distance when she ventured out for supplies. The turquoise flower remained hidden in a small wooden box beneath her bed, but she touched it each night, like a talisman against the loneliness that threatened to consume her. When she finally made her way to their meeting place, her heart sank to find it empty. Had Aiyana given up on her? Had the near discovery frightened him away? She sat on the familiar boulder, watching the water flow past as tears pricked her eyes. "I thought you had forgotten me." Elena spun around to find Aiyana emerging from the deeper shadows of the cottonwoods. Relief flooded through her as she saw he was unharmed, though new lines of tension marked his face. "I couldn't come," she said, rising to meet him. "They've been watching me." "I know. I have watched them watching you." His expression darkened. "The pale-haired man, he comes to your house too often. Robert Henley, he wants to marry me." She saw Aiyana's jaw tighten at her words. "I've refused him, but he's not accepting my answer. He touches you without permission." Elena was startled by the observation. "You've been watching. I needed to know you were safe." Aiyana moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "The night of the storm after you left, I remained hidden until they departed. I saw how he looked at you, how he held your wrist. He considers you his property." "I'm not anyone's property," Elena said fiercely. "No," Aiyana agreed, reaching out to gently touch her face. "You are a free bird who should choose her own sky." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her. They had been dancing around their feelings for weeks, but the danger of discovery had forced honesty upon them both. "Aiyana," she whispered, "what's happening between us?" Instead of answering with words, he cupped her face in his hands and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he were giving her the chance to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead melted into his embrace, he deepened the kiss with a passion that spoke of weeks of longing held in check. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together as they tried to make sense of the world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. "I love you," Elena breathed, the words escaping before she could stop them. Aiyana's eyes closed as if in pain. "Elena, I know it's impossible. I know we come from different worlds, that our peoples would see this as betrayal. But I can't lie anymore. Not to myself, and not to you." She placed her hand over his heart, feeling its rapid rhythm. "I love you, and I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "From the first moment I saw you by this water, you have lived in my heart. But love may not be enough to protect us from the hatred that surrounds us." "Then what do we do?" Aiyana was quiet for a long moment, his arms still holding her close. "There are Apache who have fled south, across the great river into Mexico. Small bands who seek to live in peace, away from both soldier and settler. You're talking about leaving?" I am talking about a life where we could be together without hiding, without shame. He pulled back to look at her directly. But it would mean leaving everything you know, Elena. Your home, your people, the life you have built. Elena thought of Cedar Ridge with its gossiping women, its controlling men, its suffocating expectations. Then she thought of Henley's possessive grip, Bradley's threats, the way they all spoke of her as if she were a problem to be solved, rather than a person with her own desires and dreams. What life? She asked quietly. I exist there, Aiyana, but I don't truly live. It would be hard, he warned. We would have little beyond each other. The desert is harsh and there would be dangers. Soldiers who hunt Apache, bandits who prey on the helpless. We wouldn't be helpless. We would have each other. Aiyana smiled then, the first truly joyful expression she had seen from him. Yes, we would have each other. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, speaking in hushed voices about routes south, supplies they would need, the timing of their escape. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff and preparing to fly. When? Elena asked as the moon began to set. The new moon is in 5 days. Darkness will hide our passage, and I know trails the cavalry has never found. He took her hands in his. But once we leave, there will be no return. Are you certain this is what you want? Elena thought of the turquoise flower hidden in her room, of the way Aiyana looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, of the freedom she glimpsed in his presence. I'm certain. As they prepared to part, Aiyana reached into his vest and withdrew a necklace made of small silver discs and turquoise beads. This belonged to my mother, he said, placing it around Elena's neck. She would have loved you, I think. You have her strength, her fire. Elena touched the necklace reverently. I'll treasure it always, as I treasure you, he said, kissing her once more before disappearing into the night. The walk back to Cedar Ridge felt different this time. Not like a retreat to safety, but like a countdown to freedom. Elena had 5 days to prepare, 5 days to gather what she could carry and say goodbye to a life that had never truly been hers. As she entered her small house, she was startled to find a lamp burning in her kitchen. Robert Henley sat at her table, a bottle of whiskey before him and a dangerous gleam in his pale eyes. Interesting piece of jewelry, he said, his words slightly slurred, his gaze fixed on the turquoise necklace at her throat. Where'd you get something like that? Elena's hand flew to the necklace, her heart racing. I bought it from a trading post. Funny thing, Henley said, rising unsteadily to his feet. Looks Apache to me. My first wife, God rest her soul, she collected Indian trinkets, recognized the craftsmanship. He moved closer, backing her against the door. Now, who do we know who might gift such a pretty bauble to a lonely widow? Mr. Henley, you need to leave. It's improper for you to be here. Improper? He laughed harshly. What's improper is you whoring yourself out to some savage buck while decent white men try to offer you respectability. Elena's temper flared. How dare you? Shut up, he snapped, grabbing her shoulders roughly. You think I'm stupid? Think I haven't noticed your little evening walks the way you come back with stars in your eyes? I know what you've been doing out there, Elena, and it makes me sick. Fear shot through her as she realized how much he suspected. You don't know anything. I know enough. His grip tightened, surely leaving bruises. But I'm willing to overlook your indiscretions for a price. Marry me, and we'll call it youthful folly. Refuse. His smile turned cruel. Well, Apache lovers don't fare too well in these parts. Neither do the savages who corrupt decent white women. Elena stared at him in horror, understanding the full scope of his threat. If she refused him, he would expose her meetings with Aiyana, putting both their lives in mortal danger. I need time to think, she whispered. You have until Sunday, he said, releasing her so abruptly she stumbled. Announcement can be made after church services. Wedding can follow within the week. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Elena? Don't even think about running. I've got men watching the roads. Any attempt to leave town, and your savage friend gets a visit from the cavalry. After he left, Elena sank to the floor, her whole body shaking. Sunday was only 3 days away, 2 days before the new moon, 2 days before her planned escape with Aiyana. She was trapped, and the walls were closing in fast. Elena spent a sleepless night pacing her small kitchen, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. By dawn, she had made her decision. She would not sacrifice Aiyana to save herself, nor would she condemn herself to a loveless marriage with a man who saw her as property. There had to be another way, Saturday morning brought unexpected opportunity in the form of Maria Santos, the elderly Mexican woman who sometimes helped with laundry for the town's wealthier families. Maria had always been kind to Elena, perhaps recognizing a fellow outsider in the predominantly Anglo settlement. "Senora Elena," Maria said quietly as they worked side by side at the town's communal washing area, "there are things I must tell you about the pale-haired man who courts you." Elena looked up sharply. "What things?" "His first wife. She did not die of fever, as he claims." Maria's weathered hands continued scrubbing, but her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "My nephew worked at their ranch. He saw the bruises, heard the screams. When she finally died, her body bore marks of violence. Horror flooded through Elena. "Are you certain?" "See, and there is more. He has debts, gambling debts to dangerous men in Tucson. Your land, your house. He needs them to pay what he owes." Maria glanced around nervously. "Be careful, Mija. Men like him, they take what they want and destroy what resists them." Elena's resolve hardened into steel. Whatever the cost, she would not become Henley's victim. That evening, she made her way to the creek, knowing it might be the last time. Aiyana was waiting, his face grave with concern. "Something has changed," he said immediately. "I can see it in your eyes." Elena told him everything. Henley's threats, his ultimatum, the truth about his first wife's death. As she spoke, Aiyana's expression grew darker, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. "He will not have you," Aiyana said when she finished. "I will kill him first." "No," Elena said firmly. "Violence will only prove what they believe about your people, and it will get you hanged." She took his hands in hers. "We leave tonight. It is too dangerous. The moon is not yet dark, and if he has men watching, then we don't take the roads." Elena's mind was working furiously. "You know the desert, the hidden trails. We travel at night, rest during the day. By the time they realize I'm gone, we'll be too far south to follow." Aiyana studied her face in the starlight, seeing the determination there. "You are asking me to take you into the wilderness with nothing but what we can carry. No shelter, no certainty of finding water, pursued by men who would kill us both without hesitation. I'm asking you to take me home," Elena said simply, "because wherever you are, that's my home now." His resolve crumbled at her words, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Then we go tonight. But first, there is something I must do." He led her deeper into the cottonwoods, to a place where the trees formed a natural cathedral under the star-filled sky. From his pack, he withdrew sage and sweetgrass, lighting them with flint and steel until fragrant smoke rose into the night air. "In my people's way," he said, his voice reverent, "marriage is not about papers or churches. It is about two souls choosing to walk the same path, to share the same fires, to face the world as one." He took her hands, their fingers intertwining. "Before the spirits who watch over this place, I choose you, Elena, in this life and all lives to come." Tears streamed down Elena's face as she understood what he was offering. "And I choose you, Aiyana. Whatever comes, we face it together." They sealed their vows with a kiss that tasted of smoke and promise, of freedom and forever. Then they began their preparations for the journey that would either lead them to a new life or to their deaths. Elena had hidden supplies in her house over the past days: dried meat, hardtack, a water skin, her few precious possessions, including the turquoise flower that had started it all. Aiyana had prepared as well, his pack containing traditional traveling food, medicines, and tools for survival in the harsh desert landscape. As midnight approached, they made their final preparations to leave the creek that had been their sanctuary. Elena took one last look at the water flowing past, silver in the starlight, carrying with it all the words they had shared, all the dreams they had built. "Vayamos," she whispered. "Let's go." They moved like ghosts through the mesquite and palo verde, following game trails and dry washes that would hide their tracks. Aiyana led with the confidence of one born to the desert, reading the landscape like others read books, finding paths where Elena saw only wilderness. As dawn approached, they took shelter in a shallow cave hidden among red rocks, sharing water and dried fruit as they listened for sounds of pursuit. Elena dozed fitfully in Aiyana's arms, exhaustion finally overcoming the adrenaline that had sustained her through the night. She woke to find him watching the desert below, his dark eyes scanning for movement. "Do you see anything?" she whispered. "Dust cloud to the north. Riders. Perhaps 6 or 7. His voice was calm, but she could feel the tension in his body. "They found your trail from town but lost it at the creek. They search in the wrong direction." Elena allowed herself a moment of relief, then began repacking their few belongings. "How far to the border?" "3 days hard travel if we move only at night, 5 if we must hide often." He turned to her, his expression serious. "It will not be easy, Elena. The desert tests all who enter it." "Then we'll pass its test," she said with quiet conviction. They traveled for 3 nights, moving through a landscape of harsh beauty under star-filled skies. During the days, they rested in whatever shelter they could find: caves, overhangs, the sparse shade of desert trees. Elena learned to read the signs Aiyana showed her: where to find water, which plants were safe to eat, how to move without leaving tracks. On the 3rd night, as they crested a ridge and saw the Rio Grande gleaming like a silver ribbon in the valley below, Elena felt her heart soar with triumph. They had done it. They had escaped the hatred and prejudice that had tried to keep them apart. "There," Aiyana said, pointing to smoke rising from a distant camp. "My cousins. They will welcome us, help us start our new life." As they began their descent toward the river and freedom, Elena thought of the people they had left behind: Henley with his rage and possessiveness, Bradley with his suspicions, the townspeople with their narrow certainties. She felt no sadness for the life she was leaving, only gratitude for the love she had found. "Do you regret it?" Aiyana asked as they walked, as if reading her thoughts. Elena looked at this man who had seen her true self from the first moment, who had offered her not just love, but freedom, not just security, but respect. The turquoise necklace lay warm against her throat, and the flower he had given her rested safely in her pack, symbols of a love that had conquered fear and prejudice. "Never," she said firmly. "This is where I belong." As the sun rose over the Mexican desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Elena and Aiyana crossed the river hand in hand. Behind them lay a world that had tried to divide them. Ahead lay uncertainty, hardship, and challenge, but they would face it together, as they had vowed under the stars. Love had found a way, as it always does when 2 hearts are brave enough to follow it into the unknown. The Apache warrior and the Spanish widow had found their freedom at last, and no force on earth could take it from them now.